What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today I'm going to be bringing forth my top streaming options for Week 5 of fantasy football, guys, at the quarterback, tight end, and defensive positions. If you waited on those positions in your drafts, if you say you didn't get your Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller types at tight end, or let's just say one of those elite quarterbacks, or if you lost, a guy like Dak Prescott or Trey Lance at quarterback, guys that can get you over the hump, maybe get you the dub this week for fantasy football. But either way, you guys have been showing a lot of support on these videos each week, so I appreciate you guys for that. And if you're watching at this point, comment your favorite streaming option for this week's slate. But before we get into the top streamers, as always, 3 at each position, let's hit the intro. All right, rapid firing these off. I'll start with the quarterback position, and a mainstay on this show, my top quarterback streamer of the week is going to be Jameis Winston, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, going to play the Seattle Seahawks. He's currently 42% rostered according to Yahoo Fantasy. And this, again, the caveat here, as long as he is fully healthy into this game, did miss this past week against the Minnesota Vikings over in London. But are you guys really surprised? He did miss that game, but everything that I was echoing on Winston in last week's show comes to fruition this upcoming week. This is the same Seahawks defense that was just shredded by Jared Goff and co with the Lions. And Winston, despite seeing, a couple boneheaded turnovers in weeks 2 and 3, actually leads an offense when he's been on the field, has shown a top 5 pass rate in the entire NFL. So as long as he's healthy, expected Michael Thomas going to be back this week. I do think that New Orleans Saints offense gets back on track this week against that Seattle Seahawks defense. So if he's available, again, 58% of the leagues he will be. Make sure you go pick him up and stream him this week. Top 15 level expectation. Next quarterback is going to be Teddy Bridgewater, quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the New York Jets this week, 2% rostered. And Teddy Bridgewater stepped in for Tua after the latter unfortunately suffered a severe concussion in Thursday's game against the Bengals. And he actually performed really well and operated the offense very well upon entering the lineup. And the scheme that Mike McDaniel has really implemented over there in Miami seems extremely quarterback friendly, and having a combo like Hill and Waddle on the outside really helps him in this matchup. Combining that with the fact that, of course, this matchup going up against the Jets is a soft matchup against a poor Jets defense, I think, as I kind of said with Winston, Teddy can be viewed as a fringe top 15 level quarterback option this week. Next quarterback and the final quarterback of the video is going to be Carson Wentz, quarterback for the Washington Commanders, going to play the Tennessee Titans at home this week. Rostered in 55% of leagues, but the caveat here is that I think he could experience some less ownership, maybe below that 50% threshold, as he's coming off, of course, that bad performance against a stout Cowboys defense. And with Carson Wentz, the story here is volume. 40-plus passing attempts in each of his games this past year. Washington is a pass-first, pass-second team with Carson Wentz at quarterback. I expect the Washington offense to get back on track after 2 tough road games against divisional rivals and arguably 2 of the top 5 defenses in the NFL with Philly and Dallas. I think this is a get-right game for the Washington offense and Carson Wentz specifically. He showed his ceiling in those first 2 games. I think he gets back on track to what we saw in those games this week against Tennessee. Let's go to the tight end position. We got number 1, Tyler Conklin of the New York Jets, going to play the Miami Dolphins on the road. 42% rostered still only in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And this is a guy I've been talking about for the last few weeks, but I don't know why people aren't quickly understanding that this is an integral part of the Jets offense. 71.4% route participation this past week, 8.2 PPR points, despite his lowest target count of the entire season with 5. Every other week before that, he commanded 7+ targets. He looks to be that clear-cut number 1 tight end on the Jets, and in my opinion, rest of the season should be viewed as a fringe top 15 level option. Matchup against Miami could lend itself to positive game script. As I kind of said with Teddy Bridgewater, I expect the Miami Dolphins to have their way with that Jets defense. So from the Jets side, they're going to need to put up points if they want to keep this game close. And with Jets being 3.5-point home underdogs, I do think that's going to be the case. Tyler Conklin should be involved, has been involved in every single game this year. I don't expect anything otherwise. Next tight end, another mainstay of the show, Hayden Hurst, tight end of the Cincinnati Bengals, going to play the Baltimore Ravens on the road this week, 21% owned in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And he, again, as I kind of said, common theme of these videos, Hurst, Conklin, Jameis Winston, they seem to be on every week. But until they're above that 50% threshold, I need to give you guys that valuable information. With Hayden Hurst this past week, 78% route participation, and he's been the team's consistent tight end one in snaps each game this year. Again, we want to tie ourselves to a piece of what we expect to be a potential elite upside offense with Cincy. They haven't really looked good in the first couple games this year. It looked to be a get right this past week against Miami. I think they blow that out of the water this week against a Baltimore Ravens defense that has really struggled to start this season. I expect Cincinnati and I expect Hayden Hurst to get right this week going up against Baltimore in that interdivisional matchup. As we know, again, Hayden Hurst isn't really flashy, but tight end after that top tier is really a crapshoot. And I want to tie myself to a player that's been performing, a player that's gotten the snaps on a really good offense, and a player that can potentially score a touchdown on what I expect, as I said, to be a high scoring game between Baltimore and Cincinnati. Final tight end that I'm fine streaming this week is going to be Mo Alley Cox, tight end of the Indianapolis Colts. He's going to play on the road against the Denver Broncos on Thursday Night Football. 5% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And the route participation here isn't too great, 63% route participation, but we did see on those routes that he played, he commanded 6 targets against Tennessee, which turned into a very, very efficient 6 receptions, 85 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns for Mo Alley Cox in this Colts offense. And with Jonathan Taylor expected out for this game, did suffer that ankle injury. I do think the Colts will be forced to operate at a much higher neutral game script passing rate than they have been thus far. Not to mention, as soon as they get into that red zone area, if they do not have a presence like Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, I don't expect Nyheim Hines to all of a sudden become an elite goal line back. I do expect, a 6'8" behemoth at the goal line to be very useful for a Colts offense that has been struggling in the red zone to start this season. I expect Mo Alley Cox to continue off that impressive stat line that he put up this past week going up against Tennessee. But now we travel to the defensive side here. The number one defense I want to stream this week is going to be the Minnesota Vikings playing the Chicago Bears at home, 42% rostered for this Vikings defense. And the reason why I'm allured by this Vikings potential matchup against Chicago is that this game has a very low implied point total, 44 in this game. And not to mention with Chicago's offense, they have really, really struggled to start the season, haven't scored over 23 points in a single game this year. And with Justin Fields, he's been sacked 16 times in the 4 games that he's played. With Minnesota, they're a 7-point home favorite. I expect this game to be over really before it even started. And streaming defenses becomes very easy once we just realize that any matchup against the Bears is usually a good recipe for scoring fantasy points. That leads us to the Minnesota Vikings this week. Fire them up with confidence in your DST spot. Next defense I'm willing to trust this week is going to be the Miami Dolphins, again, traveling on the road to play the New York Jets, 22% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And as I was kind of echoing with the Minnesota Vikings and why I think they're a good play, a lot of that applies to Miami here. The Dolphins are 3.5-point road favorites in a game with a low set over-under at 44. Zach Wilson, again, I'm bullish on him on the channel. I think he's got the upside to potentially be a very good quarterback, but for the time being, he's still a turnover-prone young quarterback. I expect the Dolphins to be able to control this game relatively easy from the early get-go, get some pressure on Zach Wilson, and ultimately force some takeaways in this game. Final defense I'm streaming this week is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars, going to play Houston at home, 15% rostered in Yahoo Fantasy Leagues. And when it comes to the Jaguars, they're 7.5-point home favorites against Houston. I expect this Jaguars offense to really have a field day against what's been a porous Texans defense. And as we know, when it comes to defense in fantasy, passing game script is everything. If we expect that the Houston Texans are going to be behind early and be behind often, we know that they're going to throw the ball. What throwing the ball does for defense is gives them potential opportunities at taking the ball away and potentially getting sacks. And as we know in fantasy, those are the 2 most valuable things for your defense to be able to do. So I really trust the Jacksonville Jaguars at home this week against Houston. But either way, about 10 minutes. Want to keep these rapid fire for you guys, easily digestible. If you made it this far, again, comment your favorite streaming option of the week. Subscribe to the channel, currently on the road to 20,000 subscribers. And leave a like. Let's try to get this video to over 100 likes. Appreciate you guys for that consistent support. And enjoy your week. Peace out. Good luck in your matchups.
Wire me the money.